Inventor, warrior, leader. Where these three identities meet, you find Sokka, a boy from a tiny village at the South Pole who learned, despite his inability to whip around fire, water, or rock and stone, that he could make a difference far beyond his wildest dreams. His aptitude in combat, his ingenuity, and his ability to direct, protect, and inspire others enabled him to do what no one else could, even when he was just a regular guy in a world full of fantastic powers. However, Netflix Sokka seems to only fit into one of these three circles, and then sometimes in a different one. While the writing team did do a much better job with budget Sokka than they did with knockoff Katara, no surprise there, modern writers are famously bad at writing women, I still have some serious issues with how they handled his first season arc, some concerns about where they're going to take his character, and one scene in particular that I intend to tear to shreds. But first, a word of gratitude to Ian Owsley, who plays live-action Sokka and stands out as one of the best actors in the entire show. He manages to capture Sokka's goofy yet serious demeanor in a way that is reminiscent of the original, yet he makes the character his own and pulls it off quite well. It's a shame he wasn't given a better script with which to work, but he definitely elevates the mediocre dialogue far more than most of his counterparts can. All in all, where the writing lets him, Owsley captures the spirit of Sokka without simply mimicking the original performance. And in the first episode, the script itself also holds true to Sokka's character. The scene of him stepping out to face off against Zuko and his soldiers is a testament to Sokka's bravery. It's a great example of how to properly adapt a scene from animation to live action. Make it less cartoonish, but keep the thematic and character elements that made the original so meaningful. What better way to show the audience the quality of Sokka's mettle and Zuko's sense of honor than to have Sokka challenge the Fire Nation Prince to a duel and have Zuko accept? This scene made me think that maybe, just maybe, despite the incredibly clunky exposition and pointless introductory scenes at the Southern Air Temple, the creators of this show knew what they were doing. But having watched the whole season, I now suspect that this scene was written by the original creators, or at least heavily influenced by them, and most everything after this, or maybe after the next episode, is the reason they left. Because Sokka's defense of his home here is very much in line with his established character. Sokka greatly desires to be the man who defends his tribe, is willing to put his life on the line for those under his protection, and yet isn't fully able to fulfill that duty as he would like due to his youth and inexperience. In both the original and the adaptation, this gives us an excellent starting point for his character. We see the admirable qualities that Sokka has, we observe their imperfections, and we begin to understand how he will need to grow. Unfortunately, for Gas Station Sokka, I'm just going to call him Sokka from now on, the nicknames got old, things start to go a bit downhill after this first episode. Remember that whole kerfuffle about Netflix Sokka's quote-unquote sexism being toned down, or rather removed completely? Well, in the second episode, we see why that character choice was a poor one. First, because it means that obviously the Netflix writing team doesn't understand Sokka. That they didn't take the time to puzzle out why he would believe that girls are better at fixing pants than guys, and guys are better at hunting and fighting and stuff like that. It's just the natural order of things. Gee, I wonder why a 16-year-old boy who lives in a society where all the men have gone off to war, where he has taken on the role of patriarch, could hold such horribly sexist beliefs. We can't have our protagonists holding viewpoints that naturally derive from their environment and upbringing if they don't match our modern values, after all. Second, and more importantly, because in removing Sokka's "there's no way a bunch of girls took us down" attitude, they also remove his pride and arrogance. The cocky, self-assured kid who strolled confidently into the Kyoshi Warriors dojo and bragged about being the best warrior in my village is gone, replaced by a muted, timid, insecure young man. To be honest, if I didn't have the original, I don't know if I would be as critical of this less vibrant version of Sokka, but when you create a derivative work, you're going to be compared to the original story, especially when said story was a masterclass of character work. In the animated show, Sokka had to be broken down, humiliated, shown to be not half the warrior he would have others believe he was, in order to be built back up, and to begin his journey of becoming a truly skilled warrior. His prideful declarations about his own skill and ability had to be proven false in order for his humility to emerge and admit that he needed training. That's largely missing here. Oh, Suki shows him up a little bit when she takes her fan and slices through all the melons, and he's like, "Damn, girl.
Your fruit killing skills are remarkable."
And then she attacks him when he's not ready and he taps out and runs away in embarrassment. we can see the similarity to the original storyline, but it's just less. It's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't live up to its potential. Simulation Sokka doesn't really have to undergo any meaningful character work. He never places himself above Suki and her warriors, more just on their level. And his discovery that he is not in fact on their level comes in private, not in front of the whole dojo, making the experience and his subsequent return less impactful. This mini arc of his has good bones, but it wasn't fleshed out or given color and flavor like it was in the original, seemingly because the Netflix creators didn't want to make their Sokka sexist, and thus made his character far more lackluster. And without that dynamic of Sokka puffing out his chest only to have Suki ram it back down, the two are largely missing actual chemistry. If there's one thing this adaptation just does not do well at all, it's write relationships. It has its moments, but overall, few of the key relational story beats feel earned at all. They just kind of happen. Like when sorta Sokka and Suki start training and really they're just dancing, because there's no instruction happening here, no back and forth. The entire point of this scene is for some reason to develop sexual tension between the two. Point number 3, why the removal of Sokka's sexism was stupid, it deprived us of the line, "I am a warrior, but I'm a girl too," which accurately describes every female character in Avatar. Because why would Suki say that if Sokka never had to admit that he saw her as just a girl? Right away in the knockoff, he acknowledges that we're both warriors. No shift in his perspective was necessary. He never had to realize that this girl was in fact a warrior, and then realize that Suki was and is both. I mean, the entire point of Katara's arc, according to this show, is that women can be warriors. They were clearly okay having Pakku believe otherwise, but oh, not Sokka, not our precious Sokka. And Pakku changes his mind, so why couldn't Sokka? I just don't understand that writing decision. It removed so much flavor from the Kyoshi episode, which is supposed to be a defining story beat for the early stage of Sokka's character arc. However, in the interest of fairness, the Netflix show does not botch this episode entirely. I maintain that it mainly fails because it is just so much less than the original, despite the Kyoshi storyline runtime being longer than the original's episode, but some bits do genuinely hit home. For example, when Suki tells Clarence Sokka that not being a bender means we have to be even better than benders. We have to fight with what we have. What matters is not the power inside, it's the will and desire, the heart. Hey, that's pretty good. That line gets to the core of why Sokka is such an incredible character in the animated show. His determination and perseverance drive him to adapt, fight, and lead, even though he's just the guy in the group that's regular. Suki's line here is reminiscent of Piandao's comments. Creativity, versatility, intelligence. These are the traits that define a great swordsman. It suggests that Sokka can learn to become a great warrior despite his natural disadvantage if he fights for a worthy cause and applies himself with all the fervor and dedication he can muster. And the next scene is even a nice little payoff for this setup. What Avatar fan doesn't want to see Suki and Sokka working as a team to take down some firebenders? Sokka even pulls off a fireball deflection with a borrowed fan and steps out to face down Zhao, boomerang in hand, before Aang/Kyoshi arrives. So at this point, yeah, the show has stumbled and is significantly less than the original in its character work, but has still been holding somewhat true to Sokka's original character, and even seems to be going in the right direction. But in the next episode, things begin to go awry. The Mechanist comments how Xerox Sokka's dad must be proud of his ingenuity, but Sokka replies, Dad doesn't really pay attention to stuff like this. He's got more important things to worry about. He's a warrior. Of engineering, Sokka says, this is just a hobby. My role is to protect the village and be a warrior, just like Dad. Did I miss something here? Was there some world building that escaped me that explained why one could not be both an engineer and a warrior? Why has this show suddenly taken on this simplistic single-track vision of Sokka's character? The stuff like this that Hakoda apparently doesn't pay attention to was a design to make the tribe's ice-dodging ships more maneuverable. Surely the leader of a tribe whose very existence depends on their ability to catch fish while avoiding ice flows would see the value in enabling their ships to more easily avoid icebergs, or, fireballs. Why paint Hakoda as some stodgy, single-minded brute whose only occupation is fighting? As if being the patriarch of the Southern Water Tribe wouldn't require him to be far more than that. The false dichotomy of warrior versus engineer that this scene brings up is just flat out unnecessary. There's no reason for this conflict to exist. Sokka can be a warrior and an inventor/engineer, because people can be more than one thing, Netflix. Katara was not supposed to just be a waterbender, and Sokka can be more than just an engineer and more than just a warrior. You just told us in the previous episode how Sokka can develop into a great warrior. If you want to have him struggle with seeing the worth in his inventive side, that's fine. Just don't present this nonsensical either-or situation. So that scene was kind of weird and didn't follow from Sokka's previous scenes, but it could get better from there, right? Well, I'm skipping over the next episode entirely because there's no point in talking about his journey through the Cave of Two Lovers with Katara because nothing meaningful happens, and I really wish that wasn't the case. The original show absolutely dripped with meaning in basically every scene. Clearly that is not an easy feat to replicate. Oh, I guess Katara does yell, "You're not Dad!" at Sokka during their argument. That is happening for reasons I can't explain because these two characters don't have a relationship that follows any sort of sensible order. But I thought I'd mention that line because it ties into the next scene, which we'll discuss, the one which I intend to tear into tiny little shreds. I am, of course, referring to Sokka's spirit world-induced flashback to the day he passed his ice dodging trials, even though he, in his own words, lost control, and Bato had to step in and save them from death by shipwreck. But Sokka is granted the Mark of the Wise in recognition of his having passed the trial by his own father. So, let me get this straight. The leader of this tribe that lives in the frigid conditions of the South Pole, and only survives through their ability to adapt to the harsh conditions, is willing to let Sokka pass because it would hurt his feelings if he failed? Why is Hakoda letting Sokka's failure go? Even if the pass-fail thing is just symbolic, why not keep teaching the kid? I'm not sure exactly how old Sokka is supposed to be in this flashback, I guess maybe 12 or 13, and he couldn't be much older than that since their dad went off to war a good bit ago. So why act like this failure is final? What kind of terrible leader and terrible father tells their kid, "You did great," when in fact he almost got them all killed? And then doesn't even bother trying to teach him anything, to rectify his mistakes. Hakoda is not supposed to be a lax and uncaring father. He's a loving father thrust into an impossible situation, whose decision, although seemingly necessary, still causes a rift between himself and his kids. This decision by Hoax Hakoda just makes no sense. Even if this is right before he leaves for war, and the tribe needs an appointed leader, though that's probably not the context the writers had in mind, otherwise they would have had someone exposit such facts. This just seems completely unnecessary. No good parent is ever that fake with their children. It's bullshit. But oh, it gets worse. Sokka overhears Hakoda tell Bato, "The truth is, not everyone is meant to have people's lives in their hands." Well, that's it. Great job, show. You had something at least kind of good going for you, but you f***ing ruined it. Okay, so there are two ways to view this scene. Knowing what we know about this flashback, which, as told by Wan Shitong, reveals the truth that is too heavy a burden for humans to bear. First viewpoint, the awful truth that Sokka must face is that his father doesn't believe in him, doesn't think he can be a leader like Hakoda is. But of course, this scene has just shown us that Hakoda himself is a truly terrible leader because he's willing to lie to his son's face about his abilities in order to not hurt his feelings or something. Option number one sucks, mostly because it assassinates Hakoda's character. But at least it allows room for Sokka's growth, for him to prove that what his father believes about him is false, that he is worthy of having people entrust him with their lives. The second viewpoint would be that Hakoda is correct, that Sokka is not meant to have people's lives in his hands, is not meant to be a protector, is not meant to be a warrior, is not meant to be a leader, which, fuck off, show. Sokka is the leader of Team Avatar. He's not the most skilled or the most important or the strongest or any other superlative, but he is their leader. He's their guiding force. He is the one in whom they trust the most. You want proof? Watch Toph, the most independent of them all, totally trust him as she dangles hundreds of feet in the air. The idea that he somehow isn't and never will be worthy of safeguarding the lives of others is simply ludicrous. If that is the truth which the show wants us to believe Sokka must accept, then I simply do not trust it to do anything right from now on until forever. Sokka's whole arc is him learning how to grow into the warrior, the protector, the man he desperately wants to be, but doing so in ways that surprise, challenge, and humble him. This whole "not everyone is meant to have people's lives in their hands" completely undermines the entire point of the original character. But that is assuming that viewpoint number 2 is true, and Hakoda isn't just a bad father. He's a bad father no matter what, according to this show, but at least he's wrong about Sokka according to one interpretation of this scene. Either way, this scene is terrible. It takes the original's ice dodging trial, in which Sokka used his natural ingenuity and the power of teamwork to pass, and flips it on its head, crushing Sokka's character arc in the process. Of all the missteps taken by the adaptation, this one feels the most mean-spirited. However, let's consider viewpoint 1 again. Is that how this show wants us to perceive this scene? Does it want us to believe that Sokka merely needs to face the truth that his dad doesn't believe in him? Well, Hakoda quite literally says, the truth is, not everyone is meant to have people's lives in their hands, in a flashback presented to us as Sokka having to face an uncomfortable truth. The adaptation isn't exactly subtle in its messaging. Telling Sokka, you'll hear a truth that will destroy you, and then having his father say, the truth is, might be square on the nose, but that's entirely in line with this show's storytelling style. Okay, but counterpoint. At the North Pole, Yue tells Sokka that she remembers how, in the spirit world, he was worried about his friends. Your heart, she tells him. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes you a warrior. I have a feeling if your father saw you now, he would agree. Putting aside the fact that Sokka mentions his friends once during that spirit world conversation, and his own mild injuries twice, this suggests that Sokka is meant to be a warrior and a leader. Kind of a weird road to get here, but okay, fine. I guess I can work with it. But wait, remember the Mechanist conversation? How does that fit in here? This seems to provide evidence that viewpoint 2 is correct, that Sokka is meant to be an engineer rather than a warrior, regardless of how silly that dichotomy is. And now that I think about it, Sokka being an engineer, inventor, and idea guy only really comes up in the Omashu episode when he makes a couple of suggestions to the Mechanist. He doesn't do anything else remotely inventive in the rest of the season. By comparison, in Book 1, Sokka has ideas for the Earthbrender's prison break, he shows ingenuity in his ice/rock dodging trial, and then he helps the actual Mechanists with his hot air balloon and explosive gas problem in the Northern Air Temple. If this show wanted to have this engineer-warrior mutual exclusivity, then you could have at least shown Sokka to be inventive at any point after he leaves Omashu, but that scene just kind of hangs there. And to further pile on in viewpoint 2's favor, after the battle is over, the Northern Chief tells Sokka, you don't have to be a warrior to be a hero. This happens after Sokka watches Yue sacrifice herself, and apparently him being there was a big comfort to Yue, even though she clearly didn't need him at all since she froze his feet to prevent him from stopping her as she waded into the pool. I feel like the writers went, crap, people are going to want us to have Sokka do something significant. Quick, have someone tell him he did something good. Which is appropriate, considering that most of what serves as Sokka's character growth in this show is just people saying things. The Mechanist tells him he's a gifted engineer. Sokka tells the Mechanist Hakoda doesn't care about his ingenuity. His dad tells him, though indirectly, that he's not meant to be trusted with the lives of others. Yue and Suki tell him that his heart is what makes him or can make him a great warrior. And the Northern Chief tells him he doesn't have to be a warrior. As with the lack of actual inventing or engineering, Sokka also doesn't do much fighting. If you're going to have Sokka's critical character choice be am I or am I not a warrior, you should probably show him fighting or trying to fight more than twice. After the second episode's fight scene, which was actually quite good, he doesn't have any occasion to whoop out Boomerang. Even when Team Avatar assaults the Fire Nation ship at the beginning of the finale, Sokka's would-be opponents in the ship's bridge just leave for some reason right before he gets there. Because you know how ship captains leave the helm unattended when they're being attacked? I guess they didn't want to have Sokka actually fight anyone because they knew they were about to tell him that he doesn't need to be a warrior. So, to quickly recap, Sokka is brave but untrained in episode 1, is mildly humbled but not really broken down, it doesn't have to do much character growth, but still receives some training and encouragement in episode 2, appearing to continue along the warrior's path. Then he takes a step off that path and toward the destination of engineerhood in episode 3, doesn't do a damn thing in episode 4, gets completely derailed from the warrior path in episode 5, isn't even in episode 6, receives more encouragement regarding his warriorhood in episode 7, reminiscent of that he received in the second episode, as if the third and fifth episodes hadn't happened, and then in the finale gets told he doesn't need to be a warrior after all. And then he immediately turns around and tells Aang this is war. Yeah, genius it is. And do you know what war needs? I'll give you a hint. I've said the word like 100 times in this video. I honestly don't think Netflix had any real idea what to do with Sokka's character. The writers seem to want him to have this arc where he realized that his father's warrior's ways need not be his, that he can contribute to the world by more than just protecting others by fighting firebenders, but that's undercut pretty severely by his scene with Suki, his scene with Yue, and the fact that he very much does need to be a warrior because that's what the situation demands, just like Hakoda had to be a warrior. Neither of them chose to go to war, they were thrust into it by events outside their control. Having someone choose to reject the path that has been laid out for him only makes sense if his very duty doesn't lie along that same path. I get the sense that they wanted him to have this arc because, subverted gender roles and all that. Katara can be a warrior, but Sokka doesn't have to be because here at Netflix we have truly original ideas. And if you're going along the route of Sokka's character arc being that he can learn to be a great warrior slash engineer slash leader, even if his dad doesn't believe in him, you need to do more work to establish Hakoda and Sokka's relationships than that one line in the Omashu episode and this atrocious flashback. You know, maybe show how and why their relationship struggles, but as I've noted, this show just cannot write relationships. Which is unfortunate because the characters and their varied and complex relationships with each other form the very core of the original show. While Netflix managed to capture the essence of Sokka in a few brief moments, it's clear that the writers just didn't understand or want to understand his character. This story of a boy becoming a man through the development of virtue, the aid of his friends, and a healthy relationship with his father apparently wasn't acceptable to them. Gee, I wonder why.